This is Sean Garrison from Maurice telling you, yes, you, that you're listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast. And you're worthless.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at NoShockPod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Sean Garrison, formerly of Kinghorse.
And of Maurice, former lead singer of both bands.
Yeah, we kind of just dive in and kind of reminisce about Kinghorse and their story and talk about his art and painting.
Yeah, excellent interview. Let's get to it.
All right,
good night. Sean, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce to you my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Sean, thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, hi, guys.
Well,
yeah.
Well, after you can get yourself off the floor.
I hope everything's okay where you are. Yeah. I'm on the floor. I'm stiff, and I also took my socks off, which was just bad. It was just a bad move. Like, my feet feel clammy and gritty, and well, enough of that. Anyway, yeah, I'm comfortably sitting on a floor.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
All right, let's get ready for the ride here. So, the generic question is, the COVID-19 pandemic crippled everything for 2 years. How in the world did you keep yourself busy? What did you do to kill time for 2 years?
Well, all I do is make stuff. So my lifestyle changed, like, not at all, like not even a little. Yeah, I spend like 12 hours a day in a studio making art or leather work, or I just make a lot of stuff and I sell a lot of stuff, and that's what I do. So our social life, my wife and I, our social life isn't, we're at the age where it's starting to pare down and it's starting to slow down quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm just kind of, my lifestyle hasn't changed at all. If anything, my productivity just, was stellar the entire time. I mean, it was terrifying, of course. I would like to pretend that it wasn't and say some sort of hard ass fucking cynical shit about that. But that was, it was terrifying.
Yeah, I agree. You were born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. Can you tell us, our listeners, about how you got started in the world of rock and roll down there in the South?
Okay, what you got to understand is that I'm not really from Louisville. I'm from Pleasure Ridge Park, Kentucky, which wasn't incorporated into the city until about 20 years ago. So I was I was from a white flight suburb that had about 10 good years and then really hit the skids very hard. Have you ever seen that movie Gummo?
I have not.
No.
Okay, well, don't. But the only way I can really get across to you what it was like, what my background is like, is that it's as if the Juggalos owned a section of a town. That's the only way that I can really describe it. Yeah. Okay? Mm-hmm. Like that kind of crazy white trash. It was pretty nightmarish. But I got involved with rock and roll I got involved in playing in bands by meeting some kids that were on the other side of the county who were already in an established band and part of the Louisville punk rock thing. So I met those guys. The band was called Languid and Flaccid. And I met those guys, and they wanted to do a side project, where they could play like really fast thrash music, because that's what we all wanted to do in 1981, late 81. That's what was, everybody just wanted to get it out of their system.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like you wanted to make at least one kind of record like that. And, so that's how I got involved with actually playing with guys. They already had a band.
Oh, very good. Well, back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, most metropolitan areas had a scene or a pocket of rock and roll. And I guess, Louisville is not known to be a rock and roll scene, but can you tell us a little bit about the rock and roll scene that Louisville did have at the time?
Well, it depends on the era. The early 60s, local bands here played 2,000s of people.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then in the early 90s, local bands played to very, very large crowds, between 1,000 and 2,000 people consistently. Those were the two big eras for rock in our town. And there's like bands that formed around by art people and arts people who went to the Louisville School of Art and the University of Louisville School of Art. That was the first time that I'm aware of that there was a break off from the rest of people who played here.
Would you
where you had to have your own material, you had to write your own song.
Sure. Do you feel as though that the underground music movement was a vibrant thing in Louisville, or was that something that was the rock scene more prevalent or more underground, I should say?
Well, I mean, this is a cover band town. This is a bar band town, and it's at the time that I started getting interested or starting to take the idea of actually doing it seriously, when I started planning, getting up the nerve to do it and trying to, actually do research on how it was done. Every part of our town, had a popular, cover band. And they play, the same handful of cover bands kind of just dominated the town. And I mean, I'm sure that during the early psychedelic era that we probably had a underground scene, but I wasn't here for that. All I can attest to is that in about 1979, a whole bunch of people started, being influenced by more immediately contemporary music. And where I'm from, to say that there was antipathy toward that stuff I can't really overemphasize that enough. I mean, I mean, it's hard to describe what Devo did to my neighborhood, you know, and my part of the city. I mean, people were like upset, like deeply, morally, like they were sickened by, like they were angry, like they would get mad if you mentioned it, like physically mad, like, man, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah. I mean, like motherfuckers would get pissed, like. So that made it even more appealing and funnier because their terror of it and the way that they felt about the new stuff and contemporary stuff was so histrionic and so bizarre that it just made it was a ball. It was a ball to kind of be into it because just everyone was just bummed out that you were. Like really, really bummed out that you were into it. And just be like, they felt sorry for you, man. Like, I loved that. That was fucking awesome for me. I mean, I just couldn't, you know, like, it's like, you know what a neckbeard is?
I've heard the term.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Okay. Punk rock in the late 70s, like if you were into punk rock in the 70s, it was a nerd thing. Like, it was super nerdo. It was like guys who liked comic books.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I probably first heard punk music on the Dr. Demento show, which you guys probably don't even know what that is.
Oh, yeah, no,
yes, we do.
Every
yes,
Sunday night.
Okay. It's entirely possible that I heard punk rock for the first time on Dr. Demento. It was a completely and utterly outcast thing in most small town America. Only the most vile, horrible, myrmidonish, incel, zit-faced, just smartasses. I mean, just the lowest people on the social totem pole were into it. And it was fun because of that. It made it even more appealing.
Who are some of your other influences that inspired you to sing?
Well, before punk rock fucked my brain up for the rest of my life, because the Pistols pretty much fucked me up forever. Devo too. Seeing Devo on SNL it's hard to describe what that was like, you know?
I remember that,
yeah. Yeah, it was, I mean, you knew that something had changed and nothing was going to, you know, like all the guys that like looked like Robert Plant, like you guys are done. Like you could just tell. You were just like, oh man, like you were going to be laughed at from this moment on. And it was a beautiful thing. But before punk rock, I mean, the first reason that I remember buying rock magazines was because of Elton John. That was probably the first reason that I first bought New York Rock Scene magazine. I don't know if you guys know about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, believe it or not, that magazine was sold at the Quickie Mart that I could get to from my house on a bicycle in less than 5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
That was fucked up, dude. Like, we are in this is hardcore fucking land of the rednecks. I mean, crazy redneck shit day in and day out. And I could go down the street and I found out about Wayne County, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know about Wayne County. I'd never, but it was that magazine that made me know what records to look for. And this is even crazier. The best record store in the history of the city was probably a mile further down the road. And I would say 75% of the time, if I walked in there with that magazine, they could give me a record by one of those bands in there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was crazy. So every weekend, you just pick out somebody who looked completely out of their mind, and you could walk into this place and go, all right, find that, and they would, and the next time you came in there, they would have that for us.
Oh, cool.
So it was just, I got incredibly lucky about discovering super hit stuff in real time. And that's kind of what saved me.
You know when you were alluding to Devo, seeing him on SNL, and that was kind of like an era of changing of the guard of the new wave music of that time. And I can kind of piggyback off of that. Is I noticed some things when I saw Gary Newman for the first time. Yeah. And I thought, wow, this is definitely a change of the guard. I think they're right there, right along with Devo, right in the same era. Yeah. With that being said, I guess I don't want to be insulting to you, but you're obviously in the heart of country music land, in towards Kentucky.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was raised on. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
How is it, or how does rock and roll survive in an area so dominated by country and Western music?
Well, the thing is like, it's not like Elvis came here very early, and he was well received. So it's not like the town had total hatred for. There wasn't, rock and roll was not an outsider thing when I was 7, when I started buying records.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I started buying records, rock music was in no way. I mean, outsiders loved heavy metal, of course. Like stoners and those kinds of dudes. Those people loved heavy metal, but I wouldn't say heavy metal was looked at as even it wasn't looked at as scary by adults where I was from. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the thing is when you're from here and you're from my age group and older, there was just no way that you were going to escape the rural ring that is 200 miles in every direction around this town.
Mm.
I mean, there's no way to escape it. Like you have to. It's there. It's a constant adversary. But it's also something that you, at least in my case, I still felt incredibly emotionally tied to, because when I first started listening to the radio, there was an incredible amount of country rock on the radio, but I was raised to revere Hank Williams,
Of course. Oh, yeah. Of course.
Yeah, my parents revered Hank the way they revered Mozart.
Mm.
I mean, that's just how they felt about him. That, he was a great American poet, and he was. Mm-hmm. But when guys like me, and there are not a lot of people like me who went as far as I went as digging. Most people, by the time they get out of high school in our community, they're immediately planning for a family. I mean, that's just the way things were up till very recently. And, I would say by the time I was, 12 years old, I was incredibly well informed. I wanted to research the history of American bohemianism and find any ties in my part of the world. Were there any ties to bohemianism as a whole? And so you're surrounded by all these, like I said, Led Zeppelin wasn't looked at in any way as scary or upsetting to anybody. Even most people thought Kiss were harmless. For example, most adults thought Kiss were just harmless goobers. They're goons. Look, they're dressed as clowns.
Yeah.
But the Pistols really scared the shit out of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it really frightened them. And also they didn't understand, like the Ramones, like people really didn't understand what the hell that was, because they were like, well, they kind of look like male prostitutes from Central Park, and to me, they were just more guys with long hair. You know, that was my initial problem with those dudes, is that I liked the first record okay when it came out, but it was the English bands that really, really did a number on my head, and Devo.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. I mean, that was before I, started really digging. I'm talking about the easily accessible stuff.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jeff, you got the next question?
Well, yeah, I just want to take it back to your painting a little bit. You kind of allude to you're working on some art, leatherwork, and painting. Can you tell us a little bit more about your paintings and what inspires you and what's your medium for selling?
Well, I've made thousands of visual artworks, and I've sold probably a couple of thousand now.
Nice.
I never really had any interest, it's not that I didn't have any interest, is that I knew that it wasn't something that I had any particular talent for, because I don't. I just don't. But it's one of those things that you can't really teach me anything. I'm that incorrigible and I'm that suspicious. Like, you can't really teach me things. But I have like a fairly high IQ. But if you leave me alone with something, I'll get the hang of it. And that's kind of what happened with pictures.
Yeah.
It just developed. I just kept doing it because it's fun. And so I didn't really start thinking about visual art until I was well over 30. I didn't start really looking at it or researching it at all. I'd put that on the back burner,
Yeah.
I knew I liked Goya, I knew I liked, Picasso. Of course, everybody likes Picasso. But I knew what I liked. I just didn't have any proclivities toward it when I was young. I just didn't. I didn't want to bother learning to draw. Like, realism is not something that I'm even remotely interested in. I'm not interested in human beauty, like, whatsoever. Like, I'm not really interested in it. So I didn't see the point in learning to draw. See what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, if you can't draw, or you won't learn to draw because you're a jackass like myself, but you keep insisting on making pictures, over time you're going to accidentally start making interesting pictures. That seems to be what happens to most people like me.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
Yeah, very cool.
Very good.
Do you have do you sell on? Do you have like a studio or Facebook or a website, or how's it work for you?
Well, I've never needed a website because I just sell stuff on social media really easily.
Okay.
And I like to keep the stuff I can't really afford to make more ambitious stuff because I can't really move it here.
Yeah.
It's just impossible in this place. I can't, like, my favorite thing to do is probably 4 by 8 foot panel is probably my preferred size. Is that I would like to work on. I like large panels. Yeah. For example.
That's cool.
Well, there's no way I can sell those things regularly here. People don't have the room, and it's a huge amount of trouble. It takes a great deal of supplies to make pictures that big. And there's no market. There's no market. So you kind of get stuck, and limited due to the fact that it's just so impractical to make more ambitious work. For anybody, it doesn't matter what the medium is.
Right.
Here, you hit a wall very, very quick.
Well, let's go back to music.
Okay.
You were in the band Maurice early in your career. Can you give our listeners a story of Maurice and how it all came together and ended?
Maurice were the guys from Languid and Flaccid. And that was Britt Walford, who was later in Slint, Brian McMahon, who was in Slint, and later a band called the Four Carnation. That's his band. Ned Oldham, who is Will Oldham's brother, and me. That's what that band was, and it was a side project of this band that they had with two more kids from their school, Paul Catlett and Stephanie Carta. They had this band that had already gigged out at least 8 or 10 times, but they wanted this side band where they could play really fast music, and then word got out through a guy I went to high school with named Brett Ralph. He joined the first hardcore band in our town, which was called Malignant Growth. Well, the Malignant Growth guys knew the Langwood and Flaccid kids on the other side of the city. So when I found out that they wanted to do, fast music and more aggressive music, I was just like, well, I'm your guy. So I just barged in.
Anything more to the story?
Well, I mean, that's just kind of what happened. I just started, I rehearsed with them whenever I could get across the city.
Sure.
And eventually, so our first guitar player, Brian McMahon, I really love the guy, but he ended up doing this other project with another group of our friends called Squirrel Bait. And so they formed that band, and they got an independent label on the East Coast to put out their record later. But my band, Maurice, so we needed a new guitar player. Our second bass player, his name was Mike Bakayu. He knew a kid that was a virtuoso guitar player, and we were like, well, prove it. So he brings this kid over, and it's David Pajo from Slint, right? And when we met Pajo, he had just quit a prog rock cover band, and he had just gotten into punk rock and that kind of shit. And so he wanted to be in a punk rock band, and he liked Yngwie Malmsteen. Is that how you pronounce that guy's name?
Yngwie.
He was into stuff Yngwie. Yeah, Yngwie. He was into Wing Wong, as we call him here in Louisville. He was into Wing Wong Malm. I can't remember the name. Hold on, I'm trying to think of the last name we used to call him. Malmsteen? Yeah, Marmsteen. I think we called him Wing Wang Malmsteen or something like that. Anyway, he was really into that guy and Merciful Fate, and he was just starting to get into Dead Kennedys and shit. So anyway, Pajo, he gives Dave Pajo a tape of our stuff, and then he comes over 2 or 3 days later over to Britt's house, the drummer, and he knows the whole set. And he's not just a shredder during this period. He's like a nuclear shredder. At the time, he was incredibly advanced. And we were like, well, it's on now.
Yeah.
How can we use this to annoy the living shit out of everybody? And so we immediately saw it as a way to troll. Because our drummer's a musical genius, and our guitar player was a musical genius, and the bass player, Mike, and the singer, me, are idiots. We just decided, well, okay, we're just going to play this incredibly complex, incredibly difficult to play shit with all these crazy time signatures that's really kind of designed to annoy all fans of either punk rock or metal. And it absolutely worked. People couldn't stand that band. They just couldn't stand us, which made it, of course, even funnier.
Yeah.
Because it just, two of our guys were so much better than everybody else that we would ever open for, or anybody that we ever hung out with. It was just it was sad. These two like 15-year-old kids who were just, I mean, they were real musicians and incredibly intelligent and horrible, snarky brats, just these awful, just awful. And so it was really, we were just horribly smug and really hostile and in this really like mean way, in this really like, we just treated like everybody like they couldn't play and that they were dumb. And it made everybody really mad. And that was a ball. It was fun.
Well, the band did open up shows for Sam Hain, correct?
Yeah. We did like 8 shows with them on the road once, and that was pretty great. But why we got along with the New Jersey guys, I don't really know how that really. It's really hard to explain. I don't know how it happened, but I think they're rednecks too. You know what I mean?
Yes,
so they didn't really know that they were, which made it even more adorable. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, the Sam Hain guys, it was, you talk about like 2 different sides of the planet coming together to form idiotic moments. It was epic.
Very good.
It was so fucking epic. Yeah. I mean, like, I remember my parents, like, my mother feeding those guys like peanut butter sandwiches at my house. And that shit, it was pretty wild, like, because they didn't really take their costumes off. They kind of looked like that all the time. And like, they could immediately tell that it was perfectly fine at my house. Like there was no problem at all. There were comic books everywhere. Cartoons were probably blaring on the TV. They were immediately at home there. And that was an eye-opener, because I was like, uh-oh. The implications were frightening.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were so many it asked so many questions, you know.
Oh, sure.
We're like, yeah, you know, like, what kind of people end up trying this? Like, but the thing was that about those guys they weren't really that unconventional, you know. They weren't weird. Like, well, okay, they were weird, but they didn't think of themselves as weird. They thought of themselves as cool, and Louisville punk rockers don't know what that is. Like, we're not like, literally we don't know what that even is. We don't know what that even feels like. Like, the idea of just, there was something about hanging around people who authentically thought that they were cool that was fucking hilarious to us. And we were hilarious to them, because we were like these hillbilly, you know, like these weird, hyper intelligent hillbillies. So they were fascinated, I think, too. But we cock-blocked them, like, you know, like constantly. Like, we just, like, any time that they were trying to talk to anybody and be cool, we would just fuck it up. Just completely ruin it. And you could see, like, they didn't want to get mad at you, because they knew that you were doing it out of principle, you know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, they were like, we didn't understand that they might have been like enjoying it somehow, like having people like want to talk to them and make a big deal about them, or treat them like they were, you know. We didn't know what that even was. You know, we didn't even understand what that, even having anyone interested in you like that, we didn't even know what that was. So we were like constantly fucking, like, anytime, especially Eric, like anytime that I would see Erie Vaughn talking to a girl, man, I would fuck it up. I would just, every time one of us would go up there and start talking about, you know, like the boil that he had that, you know, that we knew about, or, you know, or like we would just like do whatever we could to just like absolutely ruin it. And he would become just like furious. But at the same time, he knew it was funny. You know, he knew it was funny. So yeah, that was a strange thing to hang out with like legitimate people. You know, it was weird because we could play better than them. You know, like we literally we couldn't write those kind of songs. I mean, nobody can write songs like Glenn.
Right.
I mean, he still doesn't get his due in that way, but the fact that like, you know, we just like could play with, like, we just knew more about literature and we knew more about, we just weren't rock and roll type kids, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We just weren't.
Yeah, very good.
So yeah.
Jeff, you got the next one?
Well, did that connection with them, is that kind of what led to have Glenn on produce Kinghorse?
Right. So when Maurice, I decided that me and Bakayu should quit because the music they were playing is, our set was about half of the first Slint record.
Mm-hmm.
That record is called Tweez. I don't know if you've ever heard that one.
I have not.
No.
Okay, it's Spiderland, of course, is their big album, but they made a record before that, and about half of the first Slint record is the music from the last Maurice set. So it's like they're getting even like further out. They're not like, they're dropping distortion. They're playing in jazz time signatures. They're heavily influenced by the Minutemen and Saccharine Trust, and the Chicago and the art and artier music. You know, they're getting into art rock for the first time. So we just said, well, we just gotta get out and just quit, because we're kind of fucking up their ability to really do anything. And there was like, it was just obvious that there were two guys that wanted to go one direction and two guys that wanted to go the other. So when me and Bakayu formed Kinghorse, we were both going to we were taking classes at a local junior college. We were both about 20, and I was going back to restart my history degree, because my plan was to teach middle school history. That had been my legitimate plan when I was a kid. I was always a history like freak. That's all that was the main interest of most of mine that I've carried through my entire life. Yeah. So we were going to this junior college, and I kept seeing Bakayu, the bass player for Maurice, and we were just like, I hate this. I fucking hate this. Like, we're only 20. If we start something else, do you think we can start a band and then stay and finish our degrees so your parents will leave you alone and my mom will leave me alone? And so that was our plan originally, was to just stay in college, go to the local, like transfer to the local university, and just keep our parents off our back and try to do another band as a hobby. And that's what Kinghorse was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, since we're on to Kinghorse, you know, that album, the debut album, was, I guess maybe for myself, I can only speak for myself and other people that would listen to that album when it came out. It was like, it almost seemed like it was unclassifiable. It was unclassified sound, because you had like the elements of metal and punk and just, it was all over the place.
That's the Louisville problem. You see what I'm saying? Like, what we do here, because we're not part of any, we're completely isolated here. We don't have any stylistic obligations to other scenes whatsoever. None. Like most of the bands from our town didn't bother to network. There's a band called Endpoint. Endpoint was probably the first Louisville punk band to actually network nationally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Louisville bands just didn't do that. We didn't really make friends with other bands or try to ingratiate ourselves to any kind of either national, like we just had no fealty to any stylistic rules whatsoever, because you already considered yourself kind of doomed and kind of fucked. Like you really aren't equipped for success or being in a legitimate band. You're not really equipped for it anyway. So you might as well just put everything you like and just throw it in there. You might as well, because you're fucked anyway. So you might as well try to do it the way you wanted to do it. And that's what we tried to do. We didn't, because it was a hobby at first, we just we didn't worry about marketing at all. Like, we didn't even consider it.
Okay, fair enough.
That's a punk rock problem,
It is.
That's a punk rock problem. That comes from punk rock. Because 3 out of the 4 guys in that band originally are incredibly punk rock damaged as far as their outlook was. And then our drummer was like a metal guy, like a Rush fan who had got into like early thrash metal.
Let me, if I can interrupt you here, if I can be so rude. Jeff made a really good point before we called you tonight. I'm going to take maybe the words I don't, Jeff.
No, that's fine.
Jeff made a really good point. Is like, it almost felt like Kinghorse was sonically ahead of their time from what the early sub-pop bands were doing up in Seattle. Is that fair enough to say that?
Well, I don't know if I'm qualified to really make an accurate, to even assess that properly. And let me tell you why. Like, I stopped buying new rock records in probably like 1985. And we didn't even start that band. Kinghorse didn't even start till 88.
Yeah.
So I was completely and utterly ignorant of what was going on, like as far as heavy music went. Like, I had no interest in it at all, and I never really regained much interest in it. It was something that I understood how to do. You know what I mean? I knew how to do it because I was raised on heavy metal and punk rock.
Mm-hmm.
So I understood how to do it, and I understood what made a show, good. But that it's just a punk rock problem to mix all that stuff up. But if anyone else, if we had any kindred bands, I was unaware of them.
Oh,
okay,
fair enough.
Yeah.
That was my question. I just wondered how much you were aware of what was going on in the Northeast at that time, because that kind of would eventually take over pop culture. And I was a fan of that era because in my college years, and so it was kind of ingrained in my brain at the time it happened. But listening to, I had not heard of Kinghorse, so when I doing some research for this, I kind of heard some similarities to what was going on there, and just was curious.
I mean, I would say, and I've said this before in interviews, I would say that the only 2 bands that I was aware of that were maybe doing crossover, like I didn't know that term yet. It was a while before that term, before I became aware of the term. I've said before, I would say that what Suicidal Tendencies were doing and what the Bad Brains were doing was probably more akin to what our goals were.
Okay.
And what the combinations of influences, because our guitar player is like 6 years older than me. And our guitar player was like 6 or 7 years older than the rest of the guys. So he was into rock, heavy rock before punk rock even happened. You know, he was there at the absolute start of it. So he's like HR's age, or, you know, maybe a little younger than HR.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably the same age as Mike Muir.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like they're one generation older than me. The immediate underground generation. He was part of that previous. So he was like a big brother figure to us, to me and the bass player. He was like an older brother hero type. Yeah.
Understandable.
So he had all kinds. He had the same ear that like the Bad Brains guys had, and he had the same. You know, he grew up on the same music that all those early crossover guys grew up on. So when we told him, well, yeah, just do your version of it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to me that you referred to Suicidal Tendencies with that Venice, Orange County punk / metal sound, opposed to the Bad Brains, you know, DC punk movement. You can kind of understand where the Kinghorse sound kind of drew its influences from. But with that being said,
yeah, that's because the guy writing the songs was older.
Fair enough.
That's what happened.
Yeah. Well, when the band got signed, you were signed by Caroline Records, which is at the time a very progressive label, very progressive for their time. I know the.
Oh yeah, it was a big deal.
It definitely
be on their label. Yeah.
And I remember the marketing for Kinghorse. I mean, I remember picking up Transworld Skateboard Magazine or Thrasher Magazine, and the advertisements were in there for Kinghorse, opposed to every metal magazine that I picked up. It was everywhere. I guess maybe at that time, were you and the rest of the band pleased with what Caroline brought to the table for you as far as marketing, and as far as maybe what did they bring for you guys as far as maybe sonically, the sound of the band?
Oh, I think that they made I think that they made the wrong decisions. Sorry,
like, disappointed.
I think that the producer and the label, I don't think that they screwed up our sound. They did not do it on purpose. Okay.
Yeah.
But most of the songs that made it onto that record were changed significantly enough that all of everybody who already knew the band was infuriated. I mean, there were a lot more thrash and hardcore elements in those songs before we made that record. And I don't know why Glenn chose to. I think he thought that fast music was disappearing quickly. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like that. I think that's what he thought, and so he was just trying to think about, okay, this mid-tempo shit, you know, like grunge, which he was aware of and I was not. I think he understood that mid-tempos were kind of what was about to happen, and and the label understood that, and he understood that. I just think that they made the wrong decision. I just think it was a bad decision. That's all I'm saying. Because the thing is we knew that thrash was still popular enough to where we needed to make people understand that was where we come from.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We come from hardcore. We don't come from like modern metal, like contemporary people trying to create a marketable sound. It was easier to tell that we were from the hardcore scene the way the songs originally sounded. It was just, we thought that there was enough of an audience that still liked that music that changing it was unnecessary.
I agree. You and I had this conversation via Messenger the other night. That album, though, as though you said it was kind of stripped down a bit, it still holds that underground swell of fandom that people still will talk about in social media groups. They still hold that album as being like, hey, do you remember this album and how influential it was at the time? And I know that you said that you were kind of out of the loop and all that, but even though
I didn't have any real evidence at the time that anyone liked the record whatsoever. Like we got fan mail, but anywhere we went, no one would come to see us outside of our own area. Like I remember like some people in Cleveland showed up. Like they actually authentically seemed into the record. And then we were in Gainesville, Florida once, and we seemed to have some fans in Florida. But when we would play New York or Boston or Chicago, like no one would show up.
Do you feel like maybe it was like the wrong venue for you guys, or do you just think that it didn't matter what the venue was? I mean, sometimes venue has a lot to big is big on that, you know?
Okay, here I think when a heavy record fails, it is or doesn't catch on, it is usually because the singer's voice doesn't have wide appeal. Unfortunately, that seems to be true. Like people can say, "Oh, it's solid," you know, like I like that record, but you either have a really, really good voice or you don't. Yeah. And what I am saying is that when the faster parts of our music made what I did make more sense, and the problem is when I got in there, Glenn he wanted to remove all that stuff. He wanted to completely, like, first of all, I wasn't in good voice when we recorded. I just wasn't. Like, I was the kind of singer that, like, I was probably in the right voice about once or twice a month, you know, where it was right on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Where I could scream the way I wanted, like Nick Cave. I could scream like Nick Cave from the Birthday Party, and then I could do guttural, like, you know, where all of my influences, I could kind of get them across. I was singing way outside of my ability, and already. But the thing is he took, if I had been in good voice and they had left the songs alone, I think that my other influences would have made, I just think the record would have made more sense to metal people. You know, it just would have made more sense. Yeah. And like, man, like I said, I don't think that those guys meant to screw up our record. I don't think they did. And I don't think they had any ill intentions. I think the label and the producer and the engineer and everybody were trying to be as cool as they could to us. Now we're horrible people. Like, we were incredibly incorrigible, and we're just like childish, and we were constantly like misbehaving, like full on Jackass TV show all the time. I mean, that's how we were all the time. Like, our guitar player would just shake his head, you know, but everybody else is like setting themselves on fire. Like, it was full on moronic, full on. Like, that kind of, we were those kind of bros. We were like skaters or BMX idiots, you know, just like full on get knocked unconscious once a week, fucking boobs. And I just think that you couldn't make sense of what we were after that set because of it just didn't, they just made the wrong decisions. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I have one last question for you, and we'll leave you alone for the evening. Generalized question, ask it to all of our guests. The mystery of rock and roll. You grew up in a time, I grew up in a time, Jeff grew up in a time where the mystery of rock and roll was still a mystery. Yeah. Here comes along the internet, social media. It's not a mystery anymore. as far as you as the artist and the fan, what do you prefer more, the mystery of rock and roll or the accessibility? Because, hey, if we didn't have the internet, we couldn't do this with you right now. So where's your mind at when it comes to accessibility or mystique?
Well, if rock and metal are in any way still outsider, I either have lost the ability to recognize it or it has disappeared. Now, I don't think things were better if you were truly weird, like myself, like if you were a truly weirdo motherfucker, not just a rocker person, but like an art damaged weirdo. I don't know what the world is like for you now. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like it's impossible for me to understand it. I didn't think rock or metal was just something that we did because we were directionless, lost people. That's why we did it. And I don't know why people do it now.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't know.
Fair enough.
I mean, I hope that those people have some place to work these things out, you know, instead of like shooting up a school or some crap like that, you know, like extremely alienated people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know where they go. I'm afraid that I've just gotten to the age where I'm not seeing all the colors that are in front of me anymore.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree 100%.
Yeah. Does that make any sense?
I would agree with you 100%. Yeah. We're out of our allotted time for this evening. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you'd like to plug or promote or anything like that?
No.
No?
No.
You're good?
Yeah. I'm perfectly fine.
All right. Well,
I'm going to take a shower.
That works too.
Yes. I've been putting off my shower to talk about ancient history and, you know, lost American Bohemia with you.
Yeah.
It was fun.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, we've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. This is how things are going to work out. We're about 4 weeks behind on our episodes, so I'm guessing right around the end of February, Jeff, the editing wizard over here, will get this all cleaned up, and we'll get it to you immediately. Please share it wherever you can on all your social medias, please.
Oh, yeah, I'll share it for you guys. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It was a blast. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, bye.
Take care, man. Bye.
they ever take from you, then you plug out both